I was paying for a simple cake when the world I thought I knew suddenly cracked open. The cashier, an older man, maybe in his 60s, grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. His eyes burned with something urgent, almost desperate. Before I could react, he leaned in and whispered words that sliced through me like a knife. "They're not poor, Mrs. Ellis. They've been lying to you all this time." My breath caught. The clatter of the grocery store faded into silence. I stared at him, frozen, unsure if I'd misheard. But he just released my arm, straightened his back, and went back to scanning groceries as if nothing had happened. My receipt trembled in my hand. My heart pounded so loudly I swore people could hear it. I stumbled out of the store, clutching the cake box like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Outside, I couldn't bring myself to walk straight to the car where my son was waiting. Instead, I veered toward the back exit where the dumpsters sat in shadow. The stench of old garbage mixed with the metallic taste of panic in my mouth. I crouched low, hidden behind the rusting bins, trying to replay those whispered words. Not poor. Lying. All this time, was it possible? Could Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, and her family, people I had sacrificed for, pitied, and helped, really be deceiving us? My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 67 years old, a widow who has spent her entire adult life holding one thing together, my family. My pension barely covers rent and medication, yet somehow I've always found ways to stretch it, skipping small comforts just to help others. My only son, Daniel, married Vanessa 3 years ago. She was polite at first, distant perhaps, but I convinced myself it was shyness. Over time, though, there were cracks, stories that didn't line up, odd phone calls late at night, and always the request for help. They said her father, Richard, was ill and couldn't work much. They said the bills were crushing them, that food was scarce, that they didn't know how they would make rent. And Daniel, with his kind heart, would pick up extra shifts just to send them money. I gave what I could too, even when it meant counting quarters at the pharmacy for my own prescriptions. But now, crouched behind a dumpster, I realized my trust might have been nothing but fuel for a lie. The cashier's whisper echoed inside my head, louder than the rumble of carts and the hum of cars in the lot. I forced myself to stay hidden. If there was truth in his warning, I would see it with my own eyes. Only minutes later, I did. Richard Carter walked out of the main entrance, his arms heavy with glossy black shopping bags stamped in gold. Not grocery bags, designer store bags. Bags from a place I had never dared to step inside, where a single item costs more than my entire month's groceries. He carried them casually, like this was routine. And then I saw the car. Not the beat-up sedan they always moaned about, but a new vehicle, gleaming in the sunlight, so spotless it practically glared at me. The tires were fresh, the paint flawless. Richard opened the trunk gently, like a man handling treasure, slid the bags inside, and pulled out his phone. His laughter carried across the lot as he spoke, relaxed and carefree, the laugh of someone who had no worries about overdue bills or unpaid rent. In that moment, my stomach twisted. Every sacrifice, every dollar my son and I had scraped together for them, flashed before me. And for the first time, I wondered if I had been raising not just a family, but feeding a parasite that wore the mask of need. I pressed my back against the cold metal of the dumpster, the sour stench curling into my nostrils, but I hardly noticed. My eyes were fixed on Richard Carter. He moved with the calm assurance of a man who knew he wasn't being watched. Except he was. By me. He placed the glossy bags into the spotless trunk of his car and smoothed the side of the vehicle with a proud hand, as if polishing it. The sunlight danced off the paint like a mirror. I had heard him complain countless times about his old junker barely holding together. This car was no junker. It was brand new, the kind of purchase that screams stability, not desperation. He spoke into his phone, chuckling, even throwing his head back once in laughter. It was not the laugh of a man drowning in debt or begging for help with rent. It was the laugh of someone who knew exactly how good he had it. I felt my throat tighten. Images tumbled through my mind. Vanessa calling Daniel in tears about her father's medical bills, claiming they had to choose between medication and food. Her voice, trembling with despair, still rang in my ears. The memory of pulling out my emergency savings, money I had set aside in case I ended up in the hospital myself, and handing it over without hesitation now burned like fire under my skin. Had it all been a performance? Richard ended his call and scanned the parking lot, his eyes sweeping across the cars. Instinctively, I ducked lower behind the dumpster, clutching the cake box against my chest as if it could shield me from the truth. His gaze lingered near where I hid, then shifted back toward the store. That subtle caution in his movements, checking to see if anyone had seen him, confirmed what I already feared. He wasn't acting like an embarrassed man struggling to make ends meet. He was acting like someone with a secret to guard. I stayed hidden, every nerve buzzing, every second stretching like an eternity. My gut told me this was only the surface of something darker. And then came the voices. Two elderly women strolled toward their cars, chatting over the squeak of their shopping carts. At first, their words floated past me. But then one name pierced my attention like a siren. Vanessa. "Did you see the new dress Vanessa had on yesterday at the mall?" one asked, her silver hair catching the sun. Must have cost at least $200. I saw the same one in that boutique upstairs. No way it was cheap. The other woman, thinner, with glasses perched on her nose, gave a knowing hum. "Oh, and that's not all. My granddaughter works at that French beauty store. She says Vanessa is in there all the time, dropping cash like it's falling from the sky." My pulse hammered. $200 on a dress? Frequent trips to a luxury beauty store? These were not the habits of someone pleading for rent money. The first woman clicked her tongue. And yet she keeps telling everyone her family is barely scraping by. Doesn't add up, if you ask me. My friend at the bank told me the deposits they get don't match the sob stories at all. "Gossip," the second replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "Still, it's strange, isn't it? Paying rent on that big house, buying new curtains, fresh paint. If they're really so broke, where's it all coming from?" I pressed my lips together, my chest aching. These women had no reason to lie. They were saying aloud what I had refused to see, that Vanessa and her family weren't victims of hardship. They were orchestrators of a well-rehearsed con. Their voices trailed off as they loaded their cars and drove away, leaving me alone again with my spiraling thoughts. Minutes later, Richard emerged once more from the store, this time with a smaller bag. He strolled casually to his car and stopped to chat with a man wiping down another vehicle. They laughed, shook hands, and exchanged something. From my distance, it looked like money, Richard slipping folded bills into the man's palm as if it were nothing. Another wave of nausea rose in me. If they were struggling so badly, why was he handing out money to acquaintances in the parking lot? At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. "Mom, is everything okay? Why is it taking so long?" I swallowed hard, forcing my fingers to type a lie. "Long line. I'll be out soon." I hated deceiving my son, but how could I explain that I was crouched behind a dumpster, watching his father-in-law flaunt wealth we were told didn't exist? Richard finally slid into his sleek car, started the engine, and glided out of the lot with effortless grace. I watched until the vehicle disappeared, leaving me with the undeniable evidence of my own eyes. Slowly, I rose from my hiding spot, knees stiff, heart heavy. My world had tilted on its axis. All the small inconsistencies. The designer purse Vanessa brushed off as a gift. The restaurant photos she claimed were from a friend's invitation. The home repairs supposedly paid for by extra weekend shifts. They all snapped into place like pieces of a cruel puzzle. I had wanted to believe them. I had needed to believe them, because the alternative meant admitting I had let my son be exploited for years. But now denial was no longer an option. When I slid back into Daniel's car, he glanced at me with concern. "Mom, you're pale. Was it really that long of a line?" I forced a smile, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Just busy, sweetheart. You know how weekends are." But inside, I knew the truth. The family my son had married into was not struggling. They were thriving, and they were thriving on our sacrifices. The drive to Vanessa's family home felt heavier than usual, though Daniel chatted as if nothing were wrong. His voice carried the same easy warmth, but beneath it, I heard a thread of exhaustion. I wondered how many late nights he had spent working overtime, all to cover the endless emergencies his in-laws seemed to suffer. As we pulled into their neighborhood, my breath caught. The houses here were tidy, manicured lawns stretching like emerald carpets, fresh paint gleaming on facades. Vanessa's home, in particular, stood out. 2 stories, a pristine yard with trimmed hedges, a front door polished like new. Nothing about it whispered of financial struggle. If anything, it announced comfort. Comfort built on someone else's labor. "Looks like they've done some work," I said casually, watching Daniel's face in the reflection of the car window. He nodded. "Vanessa told me her dad picked up some weekend consulting jobs. That's how they covered repairs." Consulting jobs. Another vague phrase to soften what I had just witnessed in the parking lot. A man who didn't look desperate, but proud, confident, even indulgent. The door opened before we even knocked. Vanessa stood there, glowing, her hair freshly highlighted, makeup flawless, a dress that shimmered under the afternoon light. It was not an outfit picked from a clearance rack. It was tailored, perfect. "Margaret, so glad you came," she said brightly, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of expensive perfume. The kind I had once glanced at in a department store before setting it down, realizing it cost more than my monthly utility bill. "You look lovely," I managed, forcing a smile. "This old thing," she laughed. "Got it on sale months ago, practically a steal." Her words landed with practiced ease. But I remembered the neighbors' whispers about luxury boutiques and her frequent visits to high-end beauty counters. Sales, gifts, incredible deals. There was always an explanation ready, smooth as silk. Inside, the house had transformed since my last visit. New leather couches gleamed in the living room. A glass coffee table reflected the sunlight in perfect clarity. On the wall hung a massive flat-screen TV, far newer than anything I owned. Decorative objects, art pieces, and plush rugs filled the space. I traced the details with my eyes, each one a silent indictment. "Oh, you brought a cake," Vanessa exclaimed, her tone honeyed. "That's so thoughtful, Margaret, but you didn't need to." "It's nothing," I said softly, though in truth that cake had cost me more than I could easily afford. From the kitchen drifted the rich aroma of roasting meats, herbs, and sauces that spoke of gourmet preparation. When I peeked inside, I saw countertops lined with fresh vegetables, expensive cuts of beef, imported spices, bottles of olive oil with labels in Italian. A feast, not the meager meals of a struggling family. "Dad's been helping me," Vanessa said with a laugh, motioning toward Richard as he entered the room, wearing an apron over his neatly pressed shirt. His eyes flickered briefly when they met mine, just enough to betray recognition. He knew I had seen him at the store. "Margaret," he said smoothly, "what a pleasure. We wanted to make today special for you." Special. That word rang hollow. The refrigerator behind him was stocked with abundance. The counters gleamed with evidence of spending power. Yet just last week, Vanessa had cried over the phone about not affording groceries. At the table, crystal glasses were set neatly beside gleaming silverware. Richard poured wine, deep red and fragrant, into each glass. I recognized the label. It was a bottle I had once admired at the grocery store, marked at over $50. "This is delicious," I said carefully, swirling the glass. "Is it a special brand?" Richard gave a modest shrug. "Oh, nothing fancy. A friend who works in imports gave me a good deal. You know how it is. Sometimes you just get lucky." There it was again, the magical deal. Every luxury explained away with coincidence, every extravagance disguised as a bargain. Daniel, bless him, seemed content. He laughed with Vanessa, told her about his latest project at work, beamed when she touched his arm. He didn't see what I saw, the way her watch caught the light, unmistakably designer. The subtle glance Richard gave me, daring me to challenge the narrative. The sheer abundance of food meant for far more than the 4 of us. I smiled, nodded, and tasted the carefully seasoned dishes, but inside my chest, anger and grief braided together. Every forkful of roasted meat, every sip of imported wine reminded me of the pennies I had counted at the pharmacy, the bills I had delayed, the sacrifices Daniel had made. As Vanessa excused herself to answer her buzzing phone, I caught the curve of her lips as she read a message. Private, amused, secretive. Friends, she explained when she returned, tucking the phone away. But I saw the lie glimmering in her eyes. Lunch stretched on, but for me, every minute felt like another stone added to the weight on my heart. The family across the table from me wasn't struggling. They were thriving, carefully constructing a facade of hardship to bleed us dry. And Daniel, my sweet, loyal son, was blind to it all. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the curtains, casting warm patterns across the table as we finished our meal. Daniel leaned back in his chair, laughing at something Vanessa had said, while Richard poured another round of wine into the crystal glasses. To anyone else, it might have looked like an idyllic family gathering, but to me, every gleaming surface, every polished utensil, every luxurious detail screamed of a lie too carefully rehearsed. I excused myself for a moment, retreating to the hallway. My hands trembled as I checked my phone. A new message blinked on the screen, from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. The photo nearly made me drop the phone. It was a grocery receipt dated just 2 days earlier. The total, $412.78. I scanned the list: imported wines, specialty cheeses, fresh seafood, organic produce, gourmet chocolates. Items that would cover my food budget for an entire month, gone in one shopping trip. At the top of the receipt, in bold letters, was the name, Richard Carter. Beneath the photo was a short text: Mrs. Ellis, I thought you should see this. They shop like this often. You and your son deserve to know the truth. My chest tightened. The message could only be from the cashier, Howard, the man who had grabbed my arm earlier. Somehow he had found my number. Instead of fear, I felt a strange gratitude. His warning wasn't just words whispered in a rush. Now I had proof. I slipped the phone back into my purse before anyone noticed and returned to the dining room, forcing my face into calm. Daniel was mid-story, Vanessa smiling at him with that polished ease of someone who knew exactly how to keep him charmed. Richard caught my gaze briefly, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker in his eyes, as if he suspected I knew more than I should. I sat, nodded, and let the conversation flow around me, though my mind was far from the room. The receipt blazed in my thoughts. The laughter at the table sounded hollow, a soundtrack to deceit. Later, as Vanessa cleared dishes, I wandered subtly through the living room. My eyes landed on a shopping bag tucked behind the couch. Expensive boutique lettering shimmered against the matte paper. Part of the receipt in my purse echoed in its design. I moved closer, my heart hammering. The bag was full. Dresses, blouses, still with tags dangling from them. Richard noticed my gaze. Ah, Vanessa found some incredible clearance sales this week, he said smoothly, voice carrying just enough nonchalance to sound rehearsed. You know how she loves a good bargain. A bargain. Always a bargain. But I knew better now. When we finally left, I carried the cake box back to Daniel's car, though barely a slice had been touched. My son smiled as he started the engine, humming a tune, blissfully unaware. Wasn't that nice, Mom? He said. They always try to make us feel welcome. I stared out the window, my throat tightening. Yes, they do, I murmured, though the words felt like glass against my tongue. The drive was long, filled with Daniel's chatter about work and plans, but my thoughts were elsewhere. With each mile, I recalled every phone call, every plea for help, every time Vanessa had cried about overdue bills or medical expenses. The memory of my own sacrifices stung, skipping medication to spare $20, working extra babysitting shifts even when my knees ached, giving Daniel part of my savings because he said, they really need it this time. Now I knew the truth. Every sacrifice had lined the pockets of a family already living in abundance. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat in my worn armchair with the receipt spread across my lap. The numbers glared up at me. $412.78. That was more than half my monthly pension. I thought of the small jar where I kept coins, counted and recounted until I could afford something as simple as a cake. And here they were, casually spending what would feed me for weeks on delicacies I could only dream of tasting. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me. I could no longer cling to excuses or justifications. I had seen too much. Over the next few days, more messages arrived. Each one carried another receipt, another damning piece of evidence. $589 for champagne, seafood, luxury meats. $327 for imported perfumes and cosmetics. $648 for electronics and specialty kitchenware. The dates matched almost perfectly with Vanessa's frantic calls to Daniel. Dad's medical bills are piling up. We don't have enough for rent. We can't afford groceries this week. Each plea was paired with a shopping spree. Each cry for help was a performance. And my son, my hard-working, generous son, believed every word. I remembered a phone call from just a month earlier. Vanessa had sobbed about needing $150 for her father's prescriptions. That night, I had gone to the bank and withdrawn the money, telling myself I would just cut corners the next week. Now I saw the truth. While I lay awake worrying about my own blood pressure medicine, they had toasted with champagne bought with my sacrifice. The betrayal burned deeper than money. It was trust, shredded and discarded. It was dignity, mocked. As I pieced everything together, I knew one thing with certainty. Daniel had to see the truth. But he was blinded by love, by duty, by the vows he had spoken at the altar. If I confronted him without undeniable evidence, he would only push me away, defend Vanessa, maybe even cut ties with me. No, I had to be careful. I had to gather enough proof to crush the lies completely, to leave no room for excuses. I looked again at the receipt on my lap. The ink smudged slightly from where my fingers had pressed too hard. It was just a slip of paper, yet it carried the weight of months, years of deception. And in that quiet moment, I made a vow to myself. I would not let them exploit my son any longer. I would not remain silent while Daniel sacrificed his health, his happiness, his future for a family that saw him only as a wallet. I would expose them, even if it meant breaking my own heart. The following Wednesday evening, Daniel stopped by my apartment after work. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion, his tie loosened, his face drawn with fatigue. I set a cup of tea in front of him, noticing the dark circles beneath his eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked gently. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Vanessa called earlier. Dad needs a minor surgery. Insurance doesn't cover it all, and they need $200 by Friday. I've been working double shifts all week just to make it happen." His voice was steady, but there was an undertone of strain. I recognized it instantly. The weight of someone giving more than they had, of pouring from an already empty cup. My heart clenched. $200. Just days before, I had held receipts proving Richard Carter had spent 3 times that on champagne and seafood. I couldn't let this continue. "Daniel," I said carefully, reaching across the table to hold his hand, "there's something I need to show you." He frowned, concern etched into his face. "What is it, Mom?" I pulled out my phone, opened the photo Howard had sent, and slid it across the table. The image of the $412 receipt glowed on the screen. Daniel leaned in, his brows furrowing. "What is this?" "Look at the name," I urged softly, "and the date." His eyes scanned the receipt. "Richard Carter, 2 days ago." His jaw tightened. "Over $400? On wine? Cheese?" I nodded. "Yes. And that was the same day Vanessa called saying they couldn't afford groceries." Daniel shook his head slowly, setting the phone down. "There must be an explanation. Maybe a friend treated him. Maybe he was picking things up for someone else." My chest tightened, but I pressed on. "I have more." I swiped through the photos. $589 for luxury goods, $648 for electronics. Each receipt carried Richard's name, each date aligned with another desperate plea from Vanessa. Daniel stared at the screen, his face pale. But then he exhaled sharply and shoved the phone back toward me. "Mom, no. This doesn't prove anything. You don't know the context. You can't just assume." Daniel, listen to me, I said, my voice trembling with urgency. I've seen it with my own eyes. Richard loading expensive bags into a brand new car. Vanessa in designer dresses, dripping in perfume that costs more than my monthly bills. Their home isn't falling apart. It's been redecorated. The wine we drank at dinner, $50 a bottle. Does that sound like people drowning in debt? He pulled back, running his hands through his hair. Marriage is about trust. Vanessa is my wife. If she says they're struggling, I believe her. I can't accuse her family of lying just because things don't add up. Daniel, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. Open your eyes. They're using you. Every time you break your back with overtime, every time I go without so they can have more, they're laughing at us behind our backs. His face darkened and his voice rose. Stop. Do you realize what you're saying? You're accusing my wife of being a liar. My wife, Mom. Do you know how serious that is? I swallowed hard. The words I wanted to say crowded in my throat, but I knew one wrong move would push him further away. I'm not accusing Daniel. I'm pleading. Please, just consider the possibility. Doesn't it seem strange? All the emergencies, all the perfect timing, all the excuses. He stood, pacing the small living room, the floor creaking under his weight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You've never trusted her. From the beginning, you've been looking for reasons to dislike Vanessa. This just confirms it. You're letting gossip and coincidences poison your mind. Gossip? I echoed, my voice breaking. These aren't rumors, Daniel. They're receipts, hard numbers, proof. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. And even if they are real, maybe Richard had a good month. Maybe someone lent them money. You don't know their situation. Silence thickened between us. I saw the wall rising. His loyalty to Vanessa, his refusal to let anyone, even his mother, crack it. I stepped closer, my voice soft but steady. I know you love her. I know you want to believe her. But love doesn't mean blind trust. Love also means protecting yourself. Tell me, Daniel, have you ever seen the bills, the hospital invoices, the overdue notices, or do you just take her word for it? He hesitated, his jaw working. The pause told me everything. You've never seen them, I said gently. You've just believed her. His shoulders slumped, the anger draining into weariness. He sank back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. What am I supposed to do, Mom? If you're right, if you're really right, then everything I thought about my marriage, my family, it's all a lie. I sat beside him, wrapping my arms around his trembling shoulders. I'm not asking you to make a decision tonight. I'm asking you to keep your eyes open, to stop giving without question, to demand proof before you sacrifice any more of yourself. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Daniel lifted his head, his eyes red but clearer than before. I'll think about it, he murmured. It wasn't victory. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a crack in the wall. And sometimes a crack is all you need for the truth to find its way in. That night, long after leaving my apartment, Daniel drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past his windshield, but his mind replayed my words in sharp clarity. Have you ever seen the bills, the invoices, or do you just take her word for it? For the first time in 2 years of marriage, doubt crept into his heart. He loved Vanessa. He wanted to believe her. Yet something about the receipts, the bags, the constant excuses, it all gnawed at him like a splinter under the skin. When he parked outside their house, he sat motionless for several minutes. The glow from the windows spilled warmly into the night, but to Daniel, the house looked staged, too perfect, too polished. He clenched the steering wheel, then finally stepped out. Inside, Vanessa was curled on the couch, scrolling her phone, a blanket draped elegantly across her lap. She smiled when she saw him. You're home late? Long shift again? Yeah, he muttered, loosening his tie. His eyes flicked toward the dining room, where new shopping bags leaned against the wall. He recognized one of the store logos from his mother's evidence, the same high-end boutique on the receipt. Vanessa followed his gaze and laughed lightly. Oh, those? Clearance sale. Couldn't resist. You wouldn't believe the discount. The practiced explanation rang hollow. Daniel forced a nod, but something inside him shifted. He decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, he needed answers. Quiet, undeniable answers. When Vanessa went to bed, Daniel lingered. He waited until her breathing deepened, steady and slow. Then, heart pounding, he slipped quietly into the spare room. It was stacked with boxes and bins, some half open, others sealed with tape. He pulled one open. Inside lay brand new clothes, tags still dangling, folded with care. Another box held unopened electronics, a tablet, headphones, even a designer watch in its original case. Each item screamed extravagance. Daniel's stomach twisted. These weren't survival essentials. They were luxuries, purchased while he had been working late nights to scrape together money for emergencies. Then he saw it. A leather-bound notebook perched on top of a stack of folded sweaters. He hesitated, then picked it up, his fingers trembling. The first page was dated nearly 2 years earlier, around the time of their wedding. His blood ran cold as he read the neat handwriting. Month 1. Tell Daniel we can't pay rent. Ask for $600. Use tears. Month 2. Dad's medical procedure. Request $450. Month 3. Groceries and bills. Another $300. Each line recorded not just the request, but the manipulation tactic. Cry on phone, sound desperate, mention parent sacrifices. The chilling precision of it turned his stomach. Page after page documented the same scheme. Every emergency was cataloged, every excuse rehearsed. At the margins were notes like, Daniel never asks for proof. Easy, or Mom too soft, target her next. Daniel's chest constricted. He flipped further, his eyes burning. There it was. Next month, Mom's dental emergency. Target $1,800. If Daniel hesitates, guilt trip him about family duty. He slammed the notebook shut, his breath ragged. The truth screamed at him from the pages. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a desperate family making ends meet. It was an operation, a cold, calculated con. Stumbling back, he knocked into one of the boxes. It toppled, spilling jewelry boxes onto the floor, necklaces, earrings, even diamond-studded bracelets. He had never seen Vanessa wear them. They were hidden, tucked away like stolen treasures. He sank to his knees, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. His mind flashed back to every overtime shift, every night he skipped dinner to save money, every time his mother quietly handed over her last dollars. All while Vanessa and her family lived in luxury behind his back. Daniel? The voice froze him. Vanessa stood in the doorway, her robe tied loosely, her hair falling over one shoulder. Her eyes darted to the spilled jewelry, then to the notebook in his hands. For the first time, her perfect mask faltered. What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Daniel rose slowly, holding the notebook like a weapon. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. "What is this, Vanessa? What kind of wife keeps a record of lies? Who plans emergencies like shopping lists?" She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You had no right to go through my things." "No right?" His voice cracked, echoing off the walls. "I've been killing myself at work, giving you every spare dollar, while your family have been treating me like a piggy bank. And you tell me I have no right?" Her face shifted, anger flaring, then softening into a practiced pout. "Daniel, listen, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like." He threw the notebook onto the pile of jewelry, the pages fanning open like an accusation. 2 years, Vanessa, 2 years of lies. My mother was right. She saw through you, and I defended you. I chose you over her, over the truth. And this is what I get. Tears glistened in her eyes, but Daniel saw the calculation behind them now. He recognized the act, the manipulation. "I did it for us," she whispered, "for our future. You wouldn't understand. Your mother poisoned you against me." "Stop," he cut her off, his voice steel. "Don't you dare blame her. She saved me. She had the courage to show me what I refused to see." Vanessa's mask slipped entirely, replaced with cold fury. "If you walk away now, you'll regret it. You'll never find someone who loves you like I do." Daniel laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "If this is love, lies, schemes, manipulation, I'd rather be alone." He gathered the jewelry boxes, the notebook, and the receipts his mother had given him. He no longer needed convincing. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. As he passed her, she hissed, "You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll crawl back." But for the first time in months, maybe years, he felt light. His heart still ached, but it beat with clarity. That night, he drove straight to my apartment, the evidence piled on the passenger seat. When I opened the door and saw his face, pale, eyes hollow but resolute, I knew. "Mom," he said, voice raw, "you were right about everything." And as he set the notebook in my hands, my heart broke and healed all at once. The next evening, Daniel returned to the house, not as the weary husband desperate to provide, but as a man carrying the weight of truth. He gripped the leather notebook under his arm, his jaw set, his eyes sharp. I had begged him to rest, to take time, but he shook his head. "No, Mom," he said. "If I wait, I'll lose my resolve. It has to be tonight." When he stepped through the front door, Vanessa greeted him with her usual brightness. "Honey, you're home early." Her tone was syrupy, but Daniel no longer heard sweetness in it, only calculation. He didn't smile. He didn't even remove his coat. Instead, he held out the notebook and let it drop onto the glass coffee table. The thud echoed through the room. Vanessa's eyes flickered instantly, her composure slipping for a fraction of a second before she forced a laugh. "What's this? Oh, you've been snooping again?" Daniel's voice was low, steady. "Stop pretending. I read it. Every word, every dollar you squeezed out of me, every lie you rehearsed, every tear you faked." Richard emerged from the kitchen, his expression tightening as he saw the notebook. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone wary. "What's going on?" Daniel said, turning toward him, "is that I finally see you for who you are, a family of manipulators. Con artists. You looked me in the eye, Richard, and begged for money you never needed. While you drank champagne and drove a brand new car, I was working double shifts just to keep up with your lies." Richard raised his hands in mock surrender, forcing a smile. "Daniel, calm down. You're upset. You're misunderstanding." "Don't you dare," Daniel snapped, his voice breaking with fury. "Don't you dare tell me I'm misunderstanding when I'm holding your daughter's ledger of scams. Target Daniel next month. Use guilt if he hesitates. That's not misunderstanding. That's exploitation, written in black and white." Vanessa stepped forward, tears filling her eyes, her voice trembling. "Daniel, please. I love you. Everything I did was for us, for our future. You don't know how hard it's been for my family. I just wanted stability." "Stability?" Daniel barked out a bitter laugh. "Stability is saving, budgeting, being honest, not hiding jewelry and electronics in the spare room while telling me you can't afford." Her tears streamed faster, her voice rising in desperation. "If you leave me, you'll ruin everything. Don't you understand? My family needs you." Daniel's voice dropped, raw and final. "No, Vanessa, you don't need me. You need my money, and I'm done being your wallet." Richard's face hardened, his charm evaporating. "You think you're better than us, Daniel? You think walking away makes you strong? You'll regret this. We gave Vanessa the life she deserved. You were just convenient." The words hit like a slap, but instead of breaking, Daniel straightened, taller than before. "Then I guess this marriage was never real. And if convenience was all I was to you, Richard, then hear me clearly. It ends tonight." Vanessa lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Daniel, no! You can't just walk away. Think about what people will say. Think about appearances. Please." He pulled free, his voice iron. "I don't care about appearances. I care about truth. And the truth is this marriage is over." The room fell into stunned silence. Vanessa sobbed, her body shaking, while Richard muttered curses under his breath. Daniel picked up the notebook again, clutching it tight. "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow," he said, his tone unwavering. "And if you, or anyone in this family, tries to contact me or my mother for money again, I'll take this notebook straight to the police. Let's see how your neighbors respect you then." Vanessa's sobs turned to rage. "You'll regret this. No woman will ever put up with you like I did. You'll come crawling back." Daniel stopped at the doorway, turning back only once. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "If this was your version of love, Vanessa, then I pray I never find it again." With that, he walked out into the night. The door shut behind him with a finality that echoed louder than any argument. When he arrived at my apartment later, his hands still trembled, but his eyes burned with a new clarity. I opened the door and pulled him into a hug before he could speak. "It's done," he whispered into my shoulder. "I told her. I told all of them. It's over." Tears welled in my eyes, not of sorrow, but of fierce pride. My son had faced the truth, stood tall in the face of betrayal, and reclaimed his dignity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt hope return to our family. When Daniel returned from that final confrontation, the night air clung to him like a heavy cloak. Though his words to Vanessa had been steady, his heart was in pieces. He dropped onto my couch, shoulders slumped, the notebook lying between us like a scar that couldn't heal. "It's over, Mom," he whispered, his voice hollow. 2 years of my life, gone. I touched his hand, feeling the tremor that ran through it. "Not gone, sweetheart. Learned. Painful, yes, but learned." For the first time in months, Daniel cried openly. The sobs shook his body, raw and unrestrained. He wept for the hours of overtime, for the trust he had given so freely, for the love he thought he had. I held him, saying nothing, because sometimes silence is the only balm for wounds so deep. The next morning, reality came crashing back. Daniel called in sick to work and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the divorce paperwork I had printed from the county website. His fingers hovered over the pen. "Are you sure?" I asked softly. He exhaled. "There's no going back. Even if she begged, even if she promised, I could never look at her again without seeing the lies. A marriage without trust isn't a marriage." He signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like tearing out a piece of his own heart, but also like stitching up a wound that had been festering for too long. Within a week, he had hired a lawyer. The attorney, a calm woman with sharp eyes, assured him the notebook was damning evidence. "Judges don't take kindly to systematic deceit," she said, "especially with records this detailed." As proceedings began, more secrets surfaced. Vanessa had opened a private bank account, depositing thousands over the past 2 years, money Daniel had sent for bills. Jewelry receipts appeared, credit card statements showing vacations and luxury purchases. The evidence painted a picture not of desperation, but of greed. Each revelation cut Daniel deeper, but also hardened his resolve. At night, he stayed with me, unable to face the emptiness of his own apartment. I cooked simple meals, soups, casseroles, and we ate together in silence. Sometimes he broke it with questions that tore at my heart. "Mom, how could I not see it? How did I miss all the signs?" "Because you loved her," I answered gently. "And love makes us blind to shadows. Don't punish yourself for believing. Punish them for betraying." Still, guilt clung to him like a second skin. He replayed memories, searching for red flags. He remembered Vanessa's excuses, her constant phone calls for money, her carefully timed tears. The puzzle pieces aligned too easily now. Every time she said, "You're such a good husband, Daniel. We couldn't survive without you," he said bitterly. What she meant was, "You're gullible enough to bankroll our lifestyle." I wanted to argue, to remind him that his kindness wasn't a flaw, but I knew he needed to grieve first. Only later could he learn that generosity paired with wisdom was strength, not weakness. The legal battle stretched for months. Vanessa fought, of course, claiming she had been misunderstood, that the notebook was just budgeting notes. But the judge saw through it. The handwriting, the receipts, the dates, all matched perfectly with Daniel's bank transfers. In one hearing, the judge looked directly at Vanessa and said, "This is not budgeting. This is manipulation." Daniel told me those words felt like a balm, as though finally someone other than his mother saw the truth. Yet even with the legal victories, Daniel's spirit faltered. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake on my couch, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Sometimes at 2 a.m, he whispered fears into the darkness. "Mom, what if I can never trust anyone again?" I would sit beside him, smoothing his hair like I had when he was a boy. "You will, Daniel. Trust isn't gone, it's just bruised, and bruises heal." Slowly, the healing began. He threw himself into work, not for money this time, but for the sense of control. Without Vanessa draining his income, he finally saw his paycheck stretch. He opened a savings account, the balance growing little by little. One evening, he showed me proudly, "Look, Mom, I'm building something for myself this time." We celebrated small milestones. The day his divorce was finalized, the day he paid off the credit card debt Vanessa had run up, the day he cooked his first meal in his own kitchen again. Bit by bit, Daniel reclaimed his life. But healing wasn't just financial, it was emotional. He began attending a support group for people recovering from manipulative relationships. There, he heard stories even more tragic than his own, people who had lost houses, inheritances, decades. The solidarity gave him strength. "Mom," he told me after one meeting, "I realized something. I'm not weak for being tricked. They're weak for needing lies to get what they want. Real strength is being able to give honestly, not take dishonestly." I smiled through tears. My son was finding his wisdom, the kind forged only through fire. By the end of that year, the man who had once been a weary, exploited husband was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, cautious but not bitter, wounded but healing. And as I watched him rebuild, brick by brick, choice by choice, I knew the storm had passed. Winter melted slowly into spring, and with it, Daniel's world began to thaw. The divorce was finalized, the ink dry on the papers that severed 2 painful years. Yet the wound inside him remained raw, a scar that throbbed with every reminder of what he had endured. At first, his days blurred together. Long hours at the office, quick meals eaten in silence, nights stretched sleepless on the couch of his small rented apartment. He lived simply, almost frugally, determined never again to let his resources be drained by someone else's greed. But in the quiet moments when work couldn't distract him, doubt crept in. Am I broken? Can I ever trust again? I reminded him daily, "You are not broken, Daniel. You were betrayed. There's a difference. Broken things can't rebuild themselves. But you are rebuilding, one piece at a time." And rebuild he did. He paid off debts, started setting aside money each month, even drew up a budget that made him proud. Each line item felt like reclaiming control of his own destiny. One Saturday, he walked into my kitchen holding a bank statement, his eyes shining. "Mom, look, I've saved 5,000 already. 5,000. Without anyone draining me, I can actually breathe." I hugged him, tears filling my eyes. That number wasn't just money. It was proof of healing, brick laid upon brick. Beyond finances, Daniel began restoring his spirit. He joined a gym, saying he needed to sweat out the ghosts. He cooked healthy meals, traded exhaustion for routine. Slowly, color returned to his face, laughter to his voice. He also started therapy. At first, he resisted. "I don't need someone analyzing me," he muttered. But after a few sessions, he admitted it helped. "It's like I'm unpacking years of weight I didn't realize I carried," he confessed. The therapist helped him name what he had lived through: coercive control, financial abuse, emotional manipulation. Giving those wounds names gave him power over them. One evening, after a long walk, he told me, "Mom, I realized something. Vanessa didn't destroy me. She refined me. I'm sharper now, wiser, but I haven't lost my ability to love. I just need to choose better where I place it." I smiled. "That's the true victory, Daniel, not letting bitterness define you." He nodded, a small, hopeful smile tugging at his lips. By summer, Daniel was thriving. At work, he earned a promotion, his manager praising his dedication and leadership. He used his new salary not for extravagance, but to plan a future. Together, we visited open houses, searching for a modest home where he could finally plant roots. Not too big, he insisted, just enough for a fresh start. It was during this period that he met Regina. She worked in the same office building in a different department, and their paths crossed at the coffee shop downstairs. At first, it was nothing more than polite nods, then brief conversations about long lines or bad weather. But soon, those moments stretched, shared lunches, laughter over inside jokes, the warmth of someone who listened without judgment. Regina was different. Grounded, sincere, transparent in a way Vanessa had never been. The first time she came to my apartment, she brought groceries, insisting on cooking dinner with us. As she chopped vegetables, she said with a smile, "I believe in building, not taking. I want you to know that, Mrs. Ellis." Her honesty moved me to tears. Daniel noticed and later whispered, "See, Mom, not everyone wears a mask." Still, he was cautious. "I don't want to rush. I want to build trust slowly, carefully. This time it has to be real." And it was. Step by step, conversation by conversation, Daniel learned that love didn't have to come with manipulation or secrets. As the months rolled on, I watched my son blossom. His laughter came easier, his shoulders no longer hunched with invisible weight. He bought a small house on the edge of town, modest but cozy, with a garden he tended on weekends. "I used to think success was giving until I had nothing left," he told me one afternoon as we planted flowers together. "Now I know success is balance, caring for others without abandoning yourself." Regina stood by his side through it all, steady and patient. When Daniel hesitated, afraid old wounds would resurface, she reassured him with quiet strength. "We'll build brick by brick. No rush, no pressure, just honesty." 2 years after the divorce, Daniel and Regina married in a simple ceremony. There were no extravagant displays, no rehearsed performances, just vows spoken with sincerity, friends gathered in joy, and me, standing proud as I watched my son step into a love built on truth. As I looked at him that day, strong and smiling, I thought back to the night he sat broken on my couch, notebook in hand, and whispered, "It's over." And I realized what had ended then was not his future, but his captivity. What began afterward was his rebirth. The wedding of Daniel and Regina had been small, intimate, nothing like the lavish displays I had once witnessed in Vanessa's world. Just close friends, family, a few colleagues, and me, standing in the front row, my heart swelling with gratitude. Their vows were simple yet profound, promises not of wealth or grandeur, but of honesty, patience, and partnership. When the newlyweds moved into Daniel's modest home, life settled into a rhythm that felt both fresh and familiar. Regina brought with her a warmth that transformed the space. She painted the walls soft colors, filled the kitchen with the scent of homemade bread, and planted herbs on the windowsill. Daniel, who once came home exhausted and burdened, now returned each evening with light in his eyes. One Saturday, I joined them for dinner. As I stepped into the house, Regina called from the kitchen, "Mrs. Ellis, I hope you're hungry. We made roast chicken, your favorite." Daniel appeared with a grin, carrying a bowl of salad. "See, Mom, this is what happens when two people actually plan meals together instead of faking emergencies." His tone was playful, but the unspoken contrast with the past hung in the air. I laughed, choosing not to dampen the evening with old wounds. At the table, conversation flowed easily. Regina asked about my week, listened attentively, and even made notes when I mentioned needing a new teapot. Weeks later, she surprised me with one. Nothing extravagant, but thoughtful. It was these small acts that convinced me this love was real. As months passed, their bond deepened through the everyday moments. I often visited on Sundays, helping Regina in the garden while Daniel fixed small things around the house. Together we painted fences, trimmed roses, and laughed when our clothes ended up streaked with dirt. "Mom," Daniel said one afternoon while hammering a loose step, "I used to think providing meant handing over money until nothing was left. But with Regina, I've learned that providing is sharing. Time, effort, love. Not just dollars." Regina smiled from the garden, dirt smudged on her cheek, and I saw in her eyes the quiet pride of a woman who valued truth above appearances. They also included me in decisions. When they discussed finances, Daniel asked, "Should we save for a family trip or focus on the nursery first?" A question that stunned me until I realized what it meant. A baby. Regina confirmed it with a gentle laugh. "We haven't told many people yet, but yes, we're expecting, and we want you to be a big part of this child's life." Tears blurred my vision. The thought of holding my grandchild, of witnessing a new generation born into a family built on honesty, filled me with joy so pure it almost hurt. In preparation, we spent weekends setting up the nursery. Daniel painted the walls a pale yellow, Regina sewed curtains, and I crocheted tiny blankets. Each stitch was a prayer, that this child would grow up in a world free of lies, surrounded by love. As the due date approached, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The contrast between past and present was staggering. Where Vanessa's family had thrived on deception and greed, Regina's world was rooted in honesty and giving. Where Daniel had once worked himself sick to feed a false narrative, he now spent evenings reading baby books, his hand resting on Regina's growing belly, his laughter filling the room. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Daniel spoke quietly. "Mom, do you remember the night I told you everything was over?" I nodded. I thought that was the end of me, but now I see. It was the beginning. The pain stripped me down, but it also made space for this, for her, for our child, for a life I can actually believe in. I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling. Sometimes the worst storms clear the way for the brightest skies, son. He smiled, his eyes glistening. "You were my anchor, Mom. If you hadn't shown me the truth, I'd still be drowning." That night, as I walked home under the starlit sky, I carried those words like a treasure. Life had not been easy. Betrayal had left scars, but those scars had led us here, to honesty, to love, to the promise of new life. And as I thought of the baby soon to arrive, I whispered a silent vow. I would protect this child, just as I had protected Daniel. Because family built on truth is worth every fight, every scar, every storm. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender hand soap. I sat in the corner chair, my hands clenched so tightly around my purse straps that my knuckles whitened. Outside, the night hummed with rain tapping against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. Daniel paced the room like a caged lion. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes filled with both fear and joy. Every time a nurse walked in, his breath caught. "Mom," he whispered, pausing in front of me, "I don't think I've ever been this terrified, or this happy." I smiled faintly, my chest swelling. That's how you know you're about to become a father. When the doctor finally entered, calm and composed, she said the words we had been waiting for. "She's ready. It's time." Daniel squeezed my shoulder, his eyes wide. "Wish me luck." And then he was gone, following the doctor into the delivery room where Regina was waiting. I was left alone in the hallway, my heart pounding. Minutes stretched into eternities. I whispered silent prayers for Regina's safety, for the baby's health, for Daniel's strength. I thought of all the nights I had prayed for my son when he was broken, betrayed, lost. Now I prayed for him as he stood on the threshold of fatherhood, and then it came. A cry, sharp, strong, undeniable. Tears flooded my eyes instantly. That sound, fragile yet powerful, announced a new life, a new chapter, a victory over every lie that had once tried to destroy us. Minutes later, Daniel emerged, his face streaked with tears, his arms cradling a tiny bundle swaddled in white. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Mom, meet your granddaughter." I rose on trembling legs. The baby's face peeked out, pink and perfect, her eyelids fluttering, her tiny lips pursed in sleep. I reached out a hand, brushing the softest cheek I had ever felt. "She's beautiful," I whispered, my voice breaking. So beautiful." Regina appeared soon after, tired but glowing, her smile radiant despite the exhaustion. "Mrs. Ellis," she said softly, "we want you to be the first to hold her." My breath caught as Daniel gently placed the baby in my arms. The weight was featherlight, but the meaning pressed into me with immeasurable force. She stirred slightly, her warmth seeping into my chest. In that moment, every sacrifice, every scar, every sleepless night was redeemed. Betrayal had once nearly shattered our family, but here, in my arms, was proof that truth and love had triumphed. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulder, his voice hoarse. Mom, she'll grow up knowing honesty, kindness, and strength. Because of you. You saved us, and now we get to build something real. I kissed my granddaughter's forehead, my tears falling onto her soft blanket. Welcome to the world, little one, I whispered. You will never know the lies that once haunted us. You'll grow up surrounded by truth, by love, by family that will protect you always. The rain outside eased, giving way to silence. Inside that small hospital room, our family, scarred but healed, breathed as one. For the first time in years, I felt whole. The weeks following the birth were a blur of sleepless nights, tiny cries, and tender moments that stitched themselves into memory. Regina's body was still healing, her movements slow, yet her eyes shone each time she cradled her daughter. Daniel, once a man haunted by fatigue from endless overtime, now found himself awake at 3 a.m, not for work, but to rock his baby back to sleep. I often came over, arms full of home-cooked meals and folded laundry. The house smelled of baby powder and warm milk, a scent that wrapped around me like a blessing. One night, I arrived to find Daniel pacing the living room, his shirt stained with spit-up, his hair tousled. She won't sleep, Mom, he whispered, bouncing the baby gently. I've tried rocking, singing, everything. I smiled, easing the child from his arms. Sometimes they just need a grandmother's touch. Within minutes, the little one's cries softened, her eyelids fluttering shut. Daniel sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, half laughing, half crying. Mom, he said, his voice breaking, I never knew exhaustion could feel so worth it. These were not the cries of desperation I once associated with Vanessa's staged emergencies. These were cries of life, of need, of innocence, and Daniel answered them not with money, but with presence, patience, and love. As the months passed, their home transformed. The nursery filled with small milestones, the first smile, the first laugh, the first time tiny fingers curled around mine. Each moment was a reminder that life had moved forward, leaving shadows behind. Regina proved to be everything Daniel had once prayed for. She managed the household with honesty, never hiding, never manipulating. When finances were tight, she said so openly, and they solved it together. When she was tired, she admitted it, and Daniel stepped in without complaint. Their marriage was not about appearances, but about partnership. One Sunday afternoon, as we all sat on the porch, Daniel turned to me. The baby dozed in his arms, her little chest rising and falling in rhythm with his. Mom, he said softly, do you see it? This is what real family feels like. Tears welled in my eyes. I saw it clearly. The difference between a house built on lies and a home built on truth. The laughter, the honesty, the messy but genuine love. It was everything I had ever wanted for my son. I reached out, stroking my granddaughter's soft hair. Yes, Daniel, I see it, and I thank God every day that you found your way here. As the sun set behind us, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, I realized the storm of betrayal had not destroyed us. It had refined us. Out of ashes, we had built a new beginning, one marked not by deception, but by the fragile, beautiful truth of love, lived honestly. The first year passed in a blur of tiny milestones. The first tooth, the first word, the wobbly steps across the living room floor. Each moment was celebrated with laughter and sometimes tears, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming joy. I often found myself sitting quietly in their home, watching the three of them, Daniel with his daughter perched on his knee, Regina humming softly as she folded laundry. It was a simple picture, nothing glamorous, yet it radiated the kind of wealth no money could buy. For me, the transformation was complete. I had watched my son crawl out of the wreckage of betrayal, broken and uncertain, only to rise stronger and wiser. I had seen him choose love again, not the illusion of it, but the real, imperfect, steady kind. As I tucked my granddaughter into her crib one evening, she reached up, her tiny fingers curling around mine. In that touch, I felt the promise of everything we had fought for, the truth, the resilience, the courage to rebuild. The storm was behind us now, but the journey wasn't over. Ahead lay new challenges, new joys, new stories waiting to be lived. And this time I knew, whatever came, we would face it together, anchored not in lies, but in the unshakable foundation of love and truth. There are nights when I sit by my window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, and I think back to how everything began, with a whisper from a cashier and a choice to look closer. That single moment of courage changed the course of our lives. For a long time, I carried guilt. I wondered if I had acted sooner. Would Daniel have been spared some of the pain? But over time, I realized life's lessons cannot always be rushed. Sometimes we must walk through the fire to find out how strong we truly are. I have learned that love without honesty is only illusion, that generosity without wisdom invites exploitation, and that silence in the face of manipulation is as dangerous as the lies themselves. Watching Daniel now, with Regina by his side and his daughter in his arms, I know that the scars of betrayal have not weakened him. They have carved deeper wells of empathy, patience, and courage. And for me as a mother, the greatest relief is knowing that he has emerged not only healed, but better. So I close my eyes, breathe in the night air, and whisper to myself, it is never too late to stand for the truth. Because truth, once spoken, has the power to free, to heal, and to rebuild what lies tried to destroy. It has been 3 years since that stormy chapter closed. Life now moves at a gentler pace, like a river that once raged with floods but has settled into calm waters. Daniel and Regina's daughter is a lively toddler, full of questions and laughter. She runs through the garden in bright shoes, her giggles echoing like music across the lawn. Each time she stumbles, Daniel rushes forward, not with frustration, but with open arms and encouragement. "Up you go, sweetheart," he says, and she rises, braver than before. Regina has embraced motherhood with quiet grace. She balances work and home with honesty, never pretending, never hiding. When money is tight, they plan together. When life is joyful, they celebrate simply. Watching her, I often think, this is what love looks like when it is real. It builds, it supports, it never manipulates. For me, being part of their everyday lives is the greatest gift. I spend afternoons baking cookies with my granddaughter, her tiny hands dusted in flour, her laughter filling the kitchen. On Sundays, we gather for family dinners. The meals are modest, roast chicken, pasta, fresh vegetables from the garden, but the table glows with something far richer: sincerity. Sometimes, when the little one curls up in my lap and whispers, "Grandma, tell me a story," I wonder if one day she will know the story of how her family was tested, how lies nearly broke us, and how truth rebuilt us. Perhaps she will. And perhaps she will learn, as her father did, that honesty is the strongest foundation any home can have. As I close this chapter of my reflections, I feel no bitterness, only gratitude. The betrayal we endured did not define us, it refined us. Daniel is no longer a man drained by deceit, but a husband, a father, and a son who understands the value of truth. Regina has shown us all that love can be pure and steady, and I, once a weary mother counting coins in the grocery line, now count blessings instead. Because in the end, what remains is not the money lost, but the family found, and that is a fortune no deceit can ever steal. If there is one truth I have carried from these years, it is this: betrayal wounds deeply, but silence wounds deeper. When we remain quiet in the face of manipulation, we allow lies to grow roots. But when we find the courage to speak, even if our voice trembles, we open the door for healing. I have also learned that kindness is not weakness. Generosity, when paired with wisdom, becomes a shield, not a liability. My son once gave blindly and was drained. Now he gives wisely, and his love multiplies. That is the difference between being used and being cherished. For anyone reading these reflections, I would say this: do not be afraid of uncomfortable truths. Do not mistake appearances for reality. And most importantly, do not let betrayal harden your heart. Let it sharpen your sight, yes, but never rob you of your capacity to trust those who are worthy. Today, when I see Daniel laughing with his wife and daughter, I know the storm was not the end, it was the passage. Through it, we discovered what truly matters: honesty, resilience, and family bound by truth. Because in the end, wealth fades, beauty fades, but integrity endures. And it is integrity more than anything else that turns a house into a home and a broken heart into a stronger one. Years have passed, and the little girl who once curled in my arms has now grown into a curious child with eyes full of wonder. She runs across the garden barefoot, chasing butterflies, her laughter rising like bells in the summer air. Daniel watches her with pride, while Regina teaches her the names of flowers, each word spoken with patience and honesty. Sometimes she climbs onto my lap with her storybooks, demanding, "Grandma, read." And as I turn the pages, I catch myself studying her face, the trust in her eyes, the innocence untouched by deceit. I know she will grow up differently than her father once did. She will not learn that love is something to be bartered or manipulated. She will not see tears used as weapons or generosity twisted into chains. Instead, she will learn that family means truth, that love means service and patience, and that trust is a gift too precious to squander. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, what makes a family strong?" I smiled, brushing her hair from her forehead. "Honesty, my dear, always honesty." She nodded as if she understood, and in that moment I felt a peace I had never known before. Because in her, I saw the promise of everything we had fought to protect, a future built not on lies, but on light. And I knew our story had not just healed the past. It had planted seeds for generations yet to come. As I sit in my favorite armchair, a warm quilt draped across my knees and the sound of my granddaughter's laughter drifting in from the garden, I cannot help but reflect on the winding path that brought me here. At 69, I have lived through seasons of sacrifice, storms of betrayal, and long winters of doubt. Yet I have also lived to see spring return, renewal, love, and truth blossoming where lies once tried to take root. I remember the woman I once was, the widow counting coins in the grocery line, convincing herself that silence was better than conflict. I remember the day a stranger's whisper pulled the veil from my eyes, forcing me to confront what I had refused to see. That moment changed everything. Looking back, I realized that courage often arrives not as a roar, but as a whisper that will not let you rest until you act. My whisper came in a supermarket, and from it unfolded a journey that reshaped my family forever. I have learned that life does not spare us pain, but it offers us a choice, to let pain define us or to let it refine us. Daniel chose the latter. He turned betrayal into wisdom, heartbreak into resilience, and today he stands as a husband, a father, and a man of integrity. Watching him cradle his daughter, hearing Regina's laughter as they cooked together, I know the cycle of lies was broken. What matters most, I see now, is not what we lose to deception, but what we gain when truth finally takes its rightful place. Money can be stolen, trust can be shattered, but dignity, once reclaimed, becomes unshakable. So as twilight gathers outside my window, I close my eyes and whisper a quiet prayer of gratitude. Not for a life free of storms, but for the strength to have weathered them. Not for a family without scars, but for a family whose scars have become symbols of survival. And when my granddaughter climbs into my lap and asks for stories, I tell her not only of princesses and castles, but of real battles fought with truth and love. Because one day, when I am gone, I want her to remember not just the sound of my voice, but the lesson carried in it, that honesty is the strongest legacy we can leave. And love, when lived in truth, is the only treasure that endures.